Everybody for joining us today on this, well, what's a snowy afternoon here in Ohio. I know everyone's weather's a little different, but Cathy and I wanted to spend some time this afternoon talking with you about how we used student evaluations to improve both course and program, to improve the quality of both our online courses and the quality of our online programs. Little introduction. I am Amy Grincewicz. I am the Director of Instructional Design for the College of Business at Kent State. I had a pause there since my title has recently changed, so my spiel is a little different than it was before. In addition to being the Director of ID, I also have many QM hats. I manage all the course reviews within the college, as well as facilitate the APP QMR, the IYOC, the DYOC, as well as I believe every course review that QM offers, all the way from higher ed to program and CPE. I can serve as a master reviewer and a peer reviewer on all those. I also hold a PhD in instructional design for online learning, which is kind of unique, which kind of gives me a little bit of an edge in helping to create quality online courses and programs.
Thank you, Amy. As you can see, this new title is well earned. So my name is Cathy DuBois, and I work with Amy very closely. I serve as Associate Dean for Graduate and Online Programs in the College of Business at Kent State University. I was faculty for a couple of decades there before I joined the Dean's Office staff, and I was Associate Dean for Administration, dealing with faculty mainly. That's what my title was when I first started working with Amy. And then a couple of years ago, I switched over to being Associate Dean for Graduate and Online Programs, so I could work even more closely with Amy and we could do a lot of things that we've aspired to do and had a marvelous time doing. So we have three outcomes that we are looking for in our presentation today. The first one, to discuss quality assurances processes within an online degree program. To have a quality online degree program, this quality assurance process has to be fundamentally present. The second one, identify purposes for student evaluations. Students will tell us what's working and what's not working. And so listening to them is really important. And finding constructive ways to utilize their feedback. The third one, apply student feedback to improve course and program quality. So again, making really good use of what they tell us. So this is the background. This is our MBA story background, and it's quite a scene. When Amy first came to work with us, she inherited this task of putting our MBA program online. And this was, we had a full-time program and we had a part-time program where the people came to us and took evening classes. So of course, like all MBA programs, we've got at least 5 departments, and we had 14 faculty across 5 departments. So you can see, number one, we're starting out with not a coherent group. The second point here, it was our college's first online program development endeavor. Fortunately, the people who had put the prior Associate Dean for Graduate Programs had put into the program proposal that this program would be Quality Matters certified. And I can't tell you how many times that saved us, because faculty were resisting a lot of the demands that Quality Matters poses, because you have to do things to a much better level than it takes time. Our faculty were not knowledgeable about QM, and they were not knowledgeable about online instruction. We had a complication that our programs, our courses moved from 3 credits to 2 credits, from 15 weeks long to 8 weeks long. So we had a program change the year before that, before we started our online program. So we had 1 year where they put it online, where they or they reframed the program into 2 credit courses. And then they have just 1 year to then put those courses, prepare them for online delivery. Our faculty were resistant. They were struggling with changing what content they could teach by squeezing it into 2 credit courses. And of course, you can't just squeeze it. You have to figure out what's most important. We had a short timeline. We just had 1 year. They had just had 1 year for this course change. And Amy was new to our college, so nobody knew her. There was a trust issue, trust between the administration and the faculty, and faculty from one department to the next. And now we've got this instructional design specialist, and what do we do? So it was not an easy situation. It was a situation where we needed to be very creative with how could we constructively let these faculty know what needed to be changed for improvement. So Amy put together this really wonderful process of continuous improvement, where she developed a set of standards that we accepted as a college and voted on, and they were based on the QM Higher Education 6 rubric. We had then developed a process of internal evaluation where we didn't really compensate our faculty. We compensated them royally, but not until their courses met standards. And then in the process, there was always this ongoing documentation. And there was that if you meet standards to 85% notion, and then what was next was documented in the revision roadmap. So we're in the process of tracking what have we accomplished. We're also laying out what is left to be accomplished for the next revision. And that's a really important set of documentation to have so that you're always clear on where you're headed for continuous improvement. Okay, at this point, we're going to pause for questions. Does anyone have questions? No hands up? Okay, Amy, next section.
Thank you, Kathy. I think we're all familiar with the uses of student evaluations. Most commonly, they are used for promotion and tenure for those student evaluations at the end of a course. And so typically a lot of time, I mean, we all have those end of the course evaluations that students fill out. But one of the drawbacks of those is those are usually very university central. There's not a lot of ability to change those evaluations. And at least in the case at Kent State, those student evaluations don't really apply to the course design. And so we wanted a different process in addition to just the course evaluations. There's been also research that looks at course evaluations for professional development. And knowing that when you get those course evaluations back at the end of the year, there may be opportunities for the faculty to take certain trainings. I know within the college, depending on how those student evals look, some of our faculty have been kind of urged to take some of the QM workshops. Several of our faculty have just taken the Designing Your Online course, and they're improving your online course to kind of help with not only their teaching, but also the design of the courses. There was another study done in 2014 by Blair and Valdez that really looked at the delivery challenges that occur with student evaluations and how some students are not really prepared for online courses. And so there's those type of evaluations. The ones that most closely resemble what we did was from the study in 2018, even though our surveys have been in place before that. But Stein, Davies, and Sambo did a survey on course development that was very qualitative in nature. And what they found was that in that qualitative study, students were able to really voice their concerns about the course development and opened up about alignment and any alignment issues in the course, maybe some engagement issues, but it also provided them an opportunity to talk about the things that they liked in the course. So that course development qualitative survey survey really focused not so much on the instruction of the course, but the design of the course. And so, as Cathy said, we have our own set of what we call the CoBA online design standards, which are based off of the higher education rubric. And one of those standards that we came up with is that there are module feedback surveys in the courses. And each module contains them. And in the beginning of the MBA program, these surveys were immensely helpful at helping us work with faculty on improving the design of both the courses and the programs. And so we did a lot of research. This wasn't so much my research. This was the research done by Kent State Online. These module surveys initially existed in the Kent State Online template that a lot of the strategic initiative programs and the fully online degree programs that work with Kent State Online use. But given my opportunity with the College of Business, I kind of included those module surveys directly into our CoBA template, as well as in those standards, so that we would embrace them and use them. When we created them, they're very short. We were looking for 1 to 7 questions. Ours actually has 8. And the research does support that students really do prefer short answers instead of just Likert scale multiple choice questions. So you'll see in a minute here when I talk about our survey, we do promote short answers. There's also literature that really does support that students want those multiple opportunities to provide feedback. So rather than just completing a survey at the end of the course, they like to provide the feedback while the course is going on in hopes that their instructor is looking at that feedback and incorporating their feedback as the course is being delivered. And then the final point, which was really helpful, was that students prefer that they start giving feedback early on in the course. And I see a question here. Were the faculty resistant to have the questions added to their courses, or is it mandated? This is a very interesting question. It was part of the template, and as part of our design standards, they are required to use the template as part of their compensation. But in some cases, the faculty had deleted the surveys. So once the course was being delivered, we didn't have a lot of control. But for the most part, all of the faculty that were on board with the course development process were amenable to the surveys. They just didn't address them while they were teaching. They were just kind of these little things that were in the course that they kind of ignored. Cathy, I'll let you address are you using QM as evidence for AACSB?
As evidence for what with AACSB? I'm not for accreditation. So we don't use these. Well, do we use these for assurance of learning? So I assume you mean, that's what you mean, assurance of learning feedback for AACSB. And I think some of them have fit into the notion of continuous improvement, but these are really fine-grained questions that deal with course design, and AACSB looks at program learning goals. So the program learning goals are bigger than any course. So it would be a rare module survey that would actually feed into an AACSB program learning goal.
Thanks, Cathy. That one was more up your alley than mine. So we did some research on how to create the questions, how to use them. Over time, we have switched the questions a little bit, but initially the module surveys was something that came out of Kent State Online that the College of Business actually put into practice, which really led to a lot of processes that were created for the university on how to analyze that data and how to use it. So CoBA really did kind of pave the way for using these surveys. So the survey that currently exists in our CoBA template has 8 questions. 5 are multiple choice and 3 are short answer. As you can see, these are the questions that we include in our survey are in the takeaways handout. So all 8 questions are there. These really do focus it on the design. So in all of these surveys, we're really looking at alignment, we're looking at rigor, we're looking at engagement, we're looking at accessibility. And those are kind of the big things that I always focused on when I started working with the faculty. As Cathy knows, my first round with faculty was alignment, engagement, and accessibility. And those were the 3 big things that I focused on. And so it was really nice when we created the module survey that we started getting feedback on those. And in the early design of the survey, there was a question about how long did it take you to complete the module. Initially, that was an open-ended response. But after the first round of semester data that I was analyzing, we really needed to change that because with how we had to export the data and then import it, we pretty much had to rewrite everyone's answer, because as much as we tried to get them just to put in that they spent 5 hours on the module, some students started writing us paragraphs about, I spent 5 hours reading and 3 hours doing the discussion. And so it became kind of a nightmare on the data cleanup end with that. As well, it was hard because some students would put hours, some would put minutes. So it just became easier that we made it a multiple choice question with different time ranges. So we usually went from like 0 to 3 hours, 3 to 7 hours. And so we used some scales. Obviously, I know there's some issues with the scale that we chose, but it really was just to kind of provide us some feedback on how long the students were spending in the course. And then to compare that, we also had a question about the amount of work, which looked at whether or not they thought the amount of time they were putting into the course was just about right, too little, or too much. And so that was really helpful to do some correlation analysis between those two. And then we've gotten the most robust data from these surveys on our 3 short answers, which is kind of on the feedback on the assignments and how the instructions were written and what were the most helpful and the least helpful activities within the module. And keep in mind that these surveys were in every module in the course. So I know we already paused for some of the questions that were coming in, but I wanted to build places for questions throughout. Are there any questions about how the survey was designed? Okay. So now I'm going to provide 3 example courses. And they're 3 different examples of how the survey data in these module surveys was actually used to improve the design of the course. So our first course, kind of in that internal review, what we have done is we have taken all of our CoBA design standards and we've turned them into a checklist. And very similar to QM, we look for an 85% level that each of those items are met. So we really do embrace QM when we created our standards as well as our process. And so the initial design of this course, and this was a very resistant faculty member. In addition, this was a brand new faculty to the college, as well as he had never taught this course before nor designed a course. So kind of all those first experiences all wrapped into one. The initial design of the course contained 4 2-week modules. Because for that 2 credit hour course, most of our courses are 8 weeks. So it was 2-week long. There were 4 modules that were each 2 weeks long. And In the course, the instructor had very long videos. Um, at the time, the videos were not closed captioned. Um, he created a presentation, but we did not have access to the slides, so the students didn't even have the slides that he was presenting on. There was a lot of reading, and assignment wise, there was 2 exams and 4 comprehensive problems in across these 8 weeks. And so when we kind of took a look back at the time when we did this course, we didn't have our checklist created, but in going back and reviewing that initial design of the course, we weren't meeting accessibility because we didn't have transcripts, nor did we post the slides and notes from the presentations to help the students. Um, there was very little alignment. As an instructional designer, I helped the faculty write some really strong module outcomes to support the course learning outcomes, but it wasn't clear to me how we were assessing those on just these problem sets and the exams. We didn't have any grading criteria at the time. And then there was also no interaction. And that interaction piece is one of the requirements of our graduate courses. Because of the graduate courses being smaller, we do want some type of learner-to-learner interaction in the course. So typical course build the first time around, lots of resistance. When I spoke with the faculty member about here are some of the design challenges we had, they weren't ready to listen at that point. The biggest challenge was in the length of the videos and making them accessible and the interaction piece. And so, as I said earlier, when I stress alignment, accessibility, and engagement, this course was lacking all 3. And it wasn't until we actually started looking at the student feedback from those module surveys that I could have a conversation with the faculty member about what we needed to improve in that course. So on the slide, you can kind of see we've got the table that shows the length of time students were spending on the course. Keep in mind that each of those 4 modules were 2 weeks long. So students should be spending about 22 hours on the course that week, or within those 2 weeks. And as you see, students were kind of anywhere from 4 to 56 hours. And then you can see from some of the feedback that we got on those short answer questions that it was very eye-opening. And for me, this was astounding that students were picking up on the things that I was stressing with the faculty. So obviously we knew that students were going to complain that the videos were too long. But the students were really basically saying that the readings in the course were the least helpful. And what really came out of that was that they didn't know how to read the textbook. There was no active learning going on. And so that became apparent, as well as there was that lack of alignment between how the readings and the videos help to work on all the assessments in the course. And so when we presented this to the faculty member, it was kind of eye-opening to them of, oh, I do have some things to fix with my course. So all of this, the student feedback got added to the revision roadmap document along with our design comments. And we made several big enhancements based on this feedback. One was we created what I've later termed the learning path, so that there's a description throughout the course that really walks the students through how to tackle the module. With the initial design of that course, with those 4 problem sets and the 2 exams, those items were due at the end of the module. So students were really complaining it was too much work because, as we all know, students are going to work on the materials right before they are due. And so what was happening is they were trying to cram 2 weeks worth of material into a weekend to complete those assignments. So in creating that learning path, we added some practice activities, we added some discussions, and we kind of rearranged the assignments in the course so that it was a fluid path that gave the students things to do on each day of the learning week. And then the biggest thing that was done in the course was we were able to get transcripts for all of the videos so we could create our narrated presentations that were accompanied by accessible slides and notes. And the students have written great feedback that they really like having those handouts because sometimes our students may not be sitting at their computer when they're watching those videos. So those handouts are really helpful. Were faculty volunteered for the evaluation or were they mandated? The module feedback surveys were just in the course. And so they were just built into the template. And then as part of what we call our lessons learned meeting with the faculty, which is where we review all the student data to kind of come up with additional ideas for the revision roadmap. What transcript program? At the time, the university, well, Kent State Online was using 3Play Media. For this particular course, we used Rev to do all of the closed captioning. Our second course kind of takes a little bit of a different approach. At this point during the internal review after the first initial course development, the course was basically a textbook course. The instructor had found a textbook that they wanted to use. They used the discussion questions that came from the textbook. They used the slides from the textbook to create their narrated presentations. They used the exams and the quizzes from the textbook. So everything in the course really focused on the textbook. And so as part of our standards, we kind of checked off most of those boxes that the standards were met, but the problem was kind of in the rigor because as an MBA student, we don't want to just give our graduate students a textbook course. We really want to create something that highlights the great expertise that we have with our faculty. And this course was not doing that with using a textbook. So the professor taught this course. This first round is being a textbook course. And here's the student feedback. This was a 3 credit hour course, and it was 15 weeks. I believe this was a summer offering, so it was a little bit shorter, but each of the modules in this course should be about 9 hours of work. You'll kind of see that for the amount of time that students were spending in this course, we were kind of meeting that rigor component. Students were spending the right amount of time, but it was nice to see their student comments of, I think a video lecture would be helpful. I know there's discussion boards, but they're not really engaging. They're not really working. And they really wanted some practice activities. And so these comments, along with that professor getting some more familiarity with online learning, as well as their relationship with me, really kind of allowed us to rethink the course. And so we made some dramatic enhancements. First one was the textbook was dropped out of the course completely. The narrated presentations that the faculty created that were topic-based are still present in the course because those are very helpful to the students to kind of provide that foundational knowledge. But the instructor created these great story presentations. Part of this was in that internal review and getting that feedback was I went and sat in this professor's face-to-face class to see how he teaches. And as I was present, like what makes this instructor exciting are these great stories that they tell to go along with the content. And so we actually, when we dropped the textbook, I was able to work with them and we created these really engaging stories that are about real world experiences of businesses. And so students are getting those authentic activities within their course. And so we added in practice activities. This whole course is based on doing case analyses. So there are practice cases, there are group case analyses, there's also independent analyses. Um, and these are all developed around these stories that the instructor has created, that also allow a really cool, what we call our coffee house, which is an instructor blog where they can add additional inserts into those stories that are in the course. And now the students absolutely love this course. Um, they love the instructor, and the biggest thing was just kind of getting rid of that textbook. And then our final course, because some of our courses will go through the course development process and will meet all of our design standards. And so this really does show, even when a course meets our standards, we are still promoting that continuous improvement. So in this course, the feedback was really great. The students kind of wished that our discussion posts were due later than Wednesday. That has been switched within the program. So now instead of having initial posts due Wednesday, we now have them due on Thursday to give students a little bit more time. The students commented that some of the assignment instructions were vague. So we've gone back and we've tweaked those instructions. As well as at the time, we were still developing a lot of the modules while the course was being delivered. So we had time releases on our modules. Now, in many cases, the modules are open. So in this example, I really wanted to highlight that the module survey data has been extremely helpful for courses that haven't met standards to provide that student feedback on what needs to be improved, but we also use that student feedback on just making minor tweaks to the course. So we really do listen to our students. And I see another question that popped up.
Before you went, there was one that got buried
Okay.
from Mark Stevens. Do you narrate publisher PowerPoint presentations?
Yes, in many cases, our faculty will use the publisher PowerPoint for kind of the skeleton, but then they narrate it with their own perspectives and their own information, to kind of make it very unique so that they are CoBA classes and not just textbook classes. Academic freedom and peer-to-peer evaluation, which is a gray area. That is something that we battle with the faculty. Do you mean peer-to-peer evaluation from the student perspective?
And if I could talk a little bit about the academic freedom from a faculty member perspective. We did get, as I mentioned earlier, there was resistance to this whole thing from faculty. There were a number of them that just wanted to repurpose what they were doing in the in-person classroom. And as you know, repurposing does not work. What they needed to do is come with Amy with a fresh mind, clear mind, and go through a design process. And for those faculty who weren't willing to do that, who resisted it and pushed it off, they were, sometimes we would hear complaints about academic freedom, but then we would go back and say, no, wait a minute. Amy would always give them options. She would say, you could do it this way, you could do it this way, you could do it this way, you could do it this way. She would take the student feedback and she would then give them an array of options to choose from. And then it was their academic freedom choice that they realized. But yeah, they were concerned about that initially. Not anymore. We don't hear that anymore at all.
Thanks, Kathy. We have come a long,
Oh,
long way. There is a question about OERs and if this is a zero textbook course. The course does not have a textbook any longer, but there is a course packet that the students purchase through Harvard Business Review because it highly utilizes the cases that Harvard puts out. So students still have a small fee, but because we create those course packets of all of the cases in one little packet, it does reduce the cost for the students. And then our final piece of using the module survey data was looking at the program. And I am a very much a big picture person. Like looking at individual courses is very helpful, but I wanted to look at the entire program with those surveys. And so this was from our first year, after our first 2 semesters, or maybe our first semester of running this program. And we've got data from 6 courses. And this just compares those first 2 questions that you find on your takeaway sheet. So we're looking at how much time the students are spending in the courses on each module, and then comparing and then having them answer whether or not they thought it was too much, just about right, or not enough. So again, you'll see that pretty much we've got students spending anywhere between 2 hours to the heavy 56. Keep in mind that the courses that have the little asterisks next to them, course number 2 had 4 2-week-long modules. Course number 6 is a 3-credit-hour course, so it required 135 hours of work. And so there is some differences, but it was kind of interesting to see what students were saying as their amount of time in a course, whether that being too much, just about right, or not enough. And I had always anticipated that students would always complain that work was too much. And you do see that we do have a lot of students saying things are too much, but we also have some about just about right. And then I love that we still had 3 students who thought one course needed more work. So what I sat down and did was I looked at all of this data and did a comparison of the means to correlate the data. And in looking at that correlation, in most of the courses, it was just statistically significant. And so this was kind of eye-opening for the program, because what students were thinking was too much work of 11 hours or 10 hours was actually spot on with where the course should be for rigor. So course number 6 there, where students were saying 10 hours was too much work, that course should have been 9 hours per module. So for 10 hours, that was eye-opening to us that students didn't understand how much time they needed to be putting into these courses. And so it was interesting to see that in course 5, they were saying that 7 hours in a module was too much. And in that module, it should have been 11 hours. So this was really eye-opening when I started looking at this data. And so I went to administration as well as our graduate program office and said, our students don't understand how much time they should spend for 2 credit hours and 3 credit hours. And so what we ended up doing was a program enhancement that was created, which is now one of our design standards, is that we have a course introduction presentation. And in those presentations, there is a slide that outlines out the expectations. I've given a little snippet here of one of ours. This is kind of our general, where we basically are very upfront with the students and say this course is 90 hours worth of work, and you're going to spread that across the 8 weeks. So every week you should be putting in about 11 hours. And here's kind of a ideal schedule for how you should put that in. In addition to creating this course introduction, We also started improving our marketing for the program. And so I went to our academic advisor in our graduate office and said, her name is Amy too as well. I'm like, Amy, our students are thinking that 7 hours is too much work per module, and that's a little light for what we want students to be putting in. And so I educated the graduate program staff on how to market the program and have those conversations with prospective students to let them know, like, you need to spend some time in these courses. It's not something that you can just spend like 3 or 4 hours on the weekend and complete your work. So that really became part of the conversation early on with the students, as well as the survey data really highlighted the design process that we use. And I always look at it as the importance of the vowels. So all that survey data was really helpful with looking at the alignment of the program, making sure that we've got engagement, making sure that we're putting out accessible documentation, that we're being innovative. We've got the organization, the usability, and all of that really factors into the design of the course, which is what QM standards stress as well. And then because Y is sometimes a vowel, I added U to the process because I wanted faculty to know that even though they're designing what we call these foundational master courses, that they still need to be present in the course. They need to be engaging with their students, participating in those discussions, providing them feedback, making announcements. And it's that why that really does make our courses come to life. And so we've talked a little bit about our lessons learned throughout the presentation, but as Cathy mentioned very early on, the biggest lesson learned need was that there needs to be that administrative support between the dean's office and that instructional designer. That was critical as to helping me actually be able to enhance our courses and open faculty's perspectives into what the design process can help with, because initially many of them were, I can't do what I do face to face online. And so that's why I would go and sit in their face to face classrooms and then come up with ideas for how we could do things online. The module surveys really made faculty aware that students do notice alignment, engagement, and accessibility and rigor. It's always interesting to note that the courses that had met the alignment and the accessibility standards, students never mentioned anything in their feedback surveys about having transcripts or that, the readings helped to support the assignments. The classes that didn't have that connection, didn't have that learning path, students picked up on. Um, and so it really became a good conversation starter to look at the student data with the faculty member and say, here's our design checklists and here's what the students are saying. So it really made the survey, that design checklist come to life more from the faculty when the students were speaking about it. It helped us improve not only our course design, but our program marketing. Two things that we're still kind of battling with is low response rate. And so a lot of times in those first initial rounds of the courses, faculty weren't aware that those surveys were there, nor did they know that they could actually see the anonymous data from the students. So a lot of it became kind of engaging the faculty in the survey. And so there are faculty that will post an announcement towards the end of each module that says, I do look at that module survey data and it does help me improve the design of the course. I really do wish that you would spend the time to spend and give me some feedback on the design. And as we know with surveys, just like we run into now with so many Zoom meetings, is there is survey fatigue. And so we've noticed that where in the module 1 and module 2, students are usually pretty geared towards completing those surveys, but then as the course moves on and it's very consistent layout from module to module, they're not spending as much time on those surveys. At this point, for all of those classes that are QM certified, and at this point, all of the courses in the MBA are certified, we don't use that data so much anymore. But I know faculty are still looking at that module survey data to make those minor tweaks to enhance that design a little bit more because we have that good structure. Cathy, additional lessons that you wanted to talk about or add to what I discussed?
I just wanted to underscore the having somebody who can protect the instructional designer, because I sort of viewed my role as needing to do that because Amy had so much work to do, and she should not be bogged down by the emotional frustrations and just the change that faculty were dealing with. So I tried to support her as much as I could, and then have some offlines with some of the faculty sometimes, and make sure that they understood that Amy is there to help them, not to make their life miserable. They were making their own lives miserable, and if they would just surrender to the design and development process that Amy would lay out, that it was much simpler. So I think instructional designers need that, and yeah, that's key. There's some really good questions.
I know. I love all these. I
Yeah.
love all these questions. For the course load calculator, Kent State Online has produced this really amazing Excel spreadsheet that can calculate rigor. I'm not an Excel lover myself. And so I just do a simple calculation of how many presentations, how many pages there are with the pages for the readings. I usually estimate anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes per page, depending on what type of reading it is, and then presentation. So, I mean, I spent a lot of time researching how to quantify something that's very subjective and based on students. So it's not an exact measure, but what we do is we create a little table for each module that includes the quantities of all the items. And then we now work with the faculty to kind of complete that. So myself and my educational technologist usually take a stab at saying how long different items will take, but then we always have that conversation with the faculty member. And it really has helped. And in many cases on these surveys, I usually overestimate how much time the students spend. In one course, which I didn't present, I actually said that students would probably spend about 8 hours per module. Students were spending about 4 hours per module. And in the faculty's perspective, they should be spending 20 hours per module. So that became a really exciting conversation between me and the faculty member of, this is what I think, this is what you think, and this is what the student thinks. So we actually added some more rigor to that course. Students full-time and part-time, it really depends. Initially, the program was marketed as a part-time program that they could complete in a year, but that was only if students were taking a full course load. So some of our students I know are part-time. We do have a few full-time students, but that's where the graduate program office really does work with those students. And then when designing these courses, how much do the faculty do and how much does the design staff do? In the case of the College of Business, our faculty are very fortunate for the amount of time that myself and my teammate, my educational technologist that works with me, put in. I feel that we do a lot more for faculty than other instructional design and distance learning staff may do. And part of that is my perspective that faculty are the content experts. Some of them know a lot about design. We've had several faculty take a lot of the QM workshops. And for those faculty, they're more comfortable kind of doing their own design. And then we come back and provide some suggestions and some tweaking. But for the most part, in the general process with faculty, I'm the one who's writing a lot of their outcomes. I create assignment prompts to provide them for them to then enhance and change. Sadly, my educational technologists and now my student worker that we have are getting the bulk of making documents accessible. But we do require that faculty at least come up with transcripts for us. We do ask that they provide us content, and all of that's kind of in our checklist. But we do a lot of the work for the faculty member.
It's actually, I think, a great system in that the faculty feel like it's their course, but the nuts and bolts, nitty gritty, the boring stuff, as they would say, Amy and her staff take care of. And so it frees them up to really be content experts, but the quality is there for the student. If we left all of this to the discretion of the faculty member, there would be a lot of these little things that don't get taken care of that really do matter for student experience.
I usually explain our role to faculty as we're the gift wrappers. So they come up with all of the material, they come up with all the learning materials, and my educational technologists and we package it and put the little bow on it. So we gift wrap the course for them.
And I have to say, there's a lot of innovation. The presence of, we have a faculty member who does debates in her online course that's asynchronous. We have cases. We have all manner of different ways to engage students. And so it really makes a difference for their experience. And a lot of this creativity is Amy, where students, the faculty will come and say, well, I do this in the classroom, so how can I do this online? And she'll help them figure that out.
Christine commented that she wants to get the faculty started since there's only one of her. There's a lot of great resources on the web. I know the Kent State online teaching page. We have a lot of assignment prompt handouts, the design process that we use that's based on Wiggins and McTighe's backwards design. The whole entire process that I use with faculty from start to finish. All the documents I use with faculty are on our website. So that's kind of a start, but a lot of it is, having those conversations with faculty. And I know for faculty that I don't work with one-on-one, encouraging them to take the QM workshops really does help as well. Oh, that's right. We do have the Bridge Quality Design Guide. Thank you. That's a great thing that I know that QM put out.
Yes, and if you go to the qualitymatters.org homepage, you can do a search for Bridge and you'll be able to find it. I want to thank everybody. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording